sayings that we could jump into about leadership, example, and they would all be accurate on our speaker today. But personally, Dr. Harman is someone I've looked up to. And I remember vividly wise words of advice at one of the races that we're putting on. St. Patty's Day run. It is pouring down rain. It is raining. It's windy. We have to do timing. It's a big chaos. None of the volunteers know what's going on. No one knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on. People are asking me questions. I don't know. I just got put in position of leadership. And then Dr. Harman comes up to me and he goes, "You've got a lot of people."
I think that you have a pretty big competition between, you have the Apple Cup, of course, WSU, and I keep saying, you know, you all don't know about the Southeast Conference. Dale, you don't know about it. Does anybody, why are both campuses closed on the Friday before the big game? Anybody know? Because it's a travel day. The competition is so hot, it can't be held at either school. It is held in Jacksonville, Florida. And it's called, well, and that's the game of the year for the University of Florida against Georgia. Just so you know, I mean, you think you know about competition. Anyway, I'm glad to be here today and talk about one of my favorite subjects. And there's a great article in the October Rotary magazine, and I hope you all get a chance to look at it. And the head of the World Health Organization, Aidan O'Leary, who's from Ireland, talks about the future, where we're going and what it's going to take to get there. Even though we're down to one case in each of two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. You'd think that we could stop. Well, I'm here to explain why we can't. And I'm tickled to be here. We're talking about the NID eventually, and I want to touch on a whole lot of things. But first, I want to know how many people in the audience were born after 1984? Yeah, show of hands. 1984. That's when we started. That's when Polio Plus actually began, and it's still ongoing today. So what? 35 years later. At any rate, this is kind of interesting. What's showing up there? Can we get rid of the things on the top there? Anyway, polio goes way back, and well, why? Come on, Paul. Part of my talk is up there. Anyway, oh, you're meeting Mustafa. Okay. You can do it. We know you can. Well, the first slide shows that polio goes way back. In fact, those were hieroglyphics from an Egyptian tomb. And when it gets back, I want to point out that there's a man that's in hieroglyphic, or his outline shows him walking with a leg that's atrophied, and shows him with a stick to get for mobility. And the point I was going to make before we started, that's really good, Paul. I appreciate it, but let's go back one. We'll go back. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe we should have left it, huh? See, I'm an Apple guy now. So now we're back in business here? Yep. Okay, well, at any rate, when you look at this picture, here's a gent with a leg that's atrophied. He's using a stick to get around. Fast forward to the 1950s when we had the era of the iron lung. And these are kids that are in Nigeria forever paralyzed because of a preventable disease, lacking two drops of an oral vaccine. Now that's happening today. And here's Mustafa. When I was in India to do an NID, I met this guy and took his picture. And you'll note that he's getting around with an atrophied leg and a stick. That's his mode of transportation. Here's another mode of transportation for people that are paralyzed, so both legs don't work. They use a hand cart, three-wheeled, to get around. And the kids that are paralyzed, lower legs don't work. They're called crawlers, and they wear their flip-flops on the hands as they crawl along in the dirt. Here's another series of them. So what are we doing, and why is there an urgency to continue the quest to get rid of polio? So you have to go back. I'm assuming that, and the reason I'm here today is because I'll bet part of the club, where they're so new, they haven't heard the story and where we have been in 35 years. So in 1900, 1956, polio was 500,000 crippling polio cases a day worldwide, with 50,000 deaths. And it was the beginning of the era of the iron lung in the 1950s. And this is an iron lung. And it was designed in England in the 1930s. And it helps people breathe. If polio affects the muscles of respiration and all the other muscles from the neck down, a person can't breathe. And so they get placed into this tube. And on the back of the tube is a suction device. Essentially, it's a diaphragm. And this motor is connected to a little lever. And that goes in and out all day long. Just, you can hear this thing going. And that's allowing the neck of this person is sealed here, and that's allowing that person to breathe with artificial means. And that kept many, many, many people alive. Here's a picture of one you've probably seen before. Here's what the wards look like. And this is a picture from Oak Harbor, actually, in the early 1950s. Modern respiratory systems now use compressed air. And this is Christopher Reeves, of course. Oh, yeah, sure. And the idea was thank you. Well, it's a great question. The idea was to support their respiration until whatever came back would come back. And some people could get out of the after a support of, say, 6 weeks, the nerves that were damaged healed themselves. Other people were so badly damaged by polio that they couldn't get out of the iron lung at all. And in fact, the last person in an iron lung is Martha Ann Lydiard. And there was just recently, because of Polio Plus Month and all, there's an article that just came out about her. She's now 73 and has been in the iron lung for 68 years. She is able to get out during the day, but prefers the iron lung over other respiratory means at night. She's the last one in the United States, lives in Guthrie, Oklahoma. So what have we accomplished? Well, in 1984, when we started, there were 125 nations with endemic polio. That means that the virus was everywhere. And we saw 350,000 cases a year, and polio was endemic. And then in here it comes back. In 2007, we had 4 remaining nations and 784 cases in 2007. And those nations were Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Nigeria. I'm going to click. So in 84, again, on the left-hand side is where we started. In 2015, there were 3 endemic nations and 27 cases. So how did we get from 2007 to 2015? This is where it's going to be. And here's what it looked like. The red was polio in the world in 1984. And this stopped in 2008. And there were 4 remaining nations, which Nigeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. But wait just a minute. Something happened between those years that we mentioned. In 2008, polio had a resurgence. And even though we were on a descending path, getting on top of everything, 16 nations were involved, and we went up to almost 2,000 cases. And that caused the whole world in Rotary and the whole world looking to get rid of polio to stop, take a deep breath, and say, what has happened? And that is where Mr. Gates and a lot of money came in to change things and to change the way we were carrying on. So there was a renewed urgency to succeed. And I want to just mention that what is it we're doing and why do we do it? Well, the virus can only live in the ground, in the dirt, for 7 to 10 days. It's not killed by antibiotics because it's a virus. There are no antivirals for polio. And prevention is the only defense. Prevention means that everybody in the community where the wild virus is has to be inoculated. So when the virus is looking for a new host, there aren't any. And there's 3 types of viruses, and this is important. Respiratory syncytial is the cold and also COVID virus. You cough and snort and carry on, breathe it in, and that's how you catch it. And there's bloodborne viruses like AIDS and hepatitis B. And I know we just had lunch, but the 3rd variety is fecal oral, which means that contaminated dirt and water is ingested by susceptible host kids typically. And polio and hepatitis A are the ones that represent that class. So it really boils down to sanitation, water, cleanliness, and giving drops. So on my NID, I broke away. We were seeing a youngster that had a flaccid paralysis of an extremity. One arm was just limp at her side. So we knew in this little community, wild polio virus was around. And I broke away from the group and took some pictures. And here's a little girl taking an animal to the watering hole, as you can see. And it turns out that's the water system for the entire community. And everybody is using that water. At a bigger city, you would think this is rainwater. It's not. This is sewage, and it comes out of a house, along the side of the house, and then into the curb, and then out of the house. This is what would normally go into one of our septic systems, be it a community system or your home septic system. It's coming right out of the house. So if it's a youngster inside sick with polio, that polio virus is coming right out and into the areas that are going to be played in with the kids. It's everywhere. That virus is everywhere. So one of the things that came out of the 2008 resurgence was a new vaccine, which was more powerful. And the vaccines that we use, the drop types, are attenuated living viruses. It means they've been knocked in the snout and are not as infective as they once were, but they still produce antibodies, antibody protection. So that oral drop goes into the it goes into the system, the intestinal system of the kids, produces antibodies, and protects the kid from polio. And here's what it looks like to give a drop. Casey was asking about paralysis. Well, the degree and the location of paralysis is individual. No one knows, has ever determined what causes one person to have an arm that doesn't work and another person, both legs don't work, or someone else who can't breathe. It's totally gray matter neurons, whichever ones are affected are the ones that cause the deficit. So it varies from person to person. Once the initial healing is done in 6 weeks, or maybe 6 weeks to 6 months, whatever you have at that point is permanent, will not change. And there's no cure, only prevention. So again, what are we doing about it? Well, 2008, well, actually in 1984, Rotary committed $100 million. It was actually, we raised $120 million in 1988, 9, and 10. And also brought a lot of extra money into the Polio Plus program, CDC, World Health, UNICEF, 125 nations. And at that time, world contributions were at $5.6 billion. But with that initial 120 million, Rotary committed to ending polio in the world. And after the 2 years, a lot of people made a lot of money in a lot of places, but it turns out that the kids did not get the drops. And all of a sudden, Rotarians looked at each other and said, oh my goodness, we're going to have to do something else. And we designed something called the National Immunization Day, an NID. And the one I went on was 1 to 6 February 2009, and went to India, and 3 million vaccinating health volunteers, augmented by 100,000 Rotarians, both from India and around the world. And the goal in that 1 week was to touch and inoculate 160 million kids under the age of 5. Let me say that again. 650 vaccination booths, 3 million vaccinators, 100,000 Rotarians, and trying to literally touch 160 million children. These NIDs, ladies and gentlemen, are happening all over the world. This is just one that occurred in India that I happen to participate in. So here's what it looks like. The announcements that were coming out to give these drops. Here's one of the places where people could come to get drops. Here's what it looks like. All the kids are not all that happy, some of them. Here's another one. And this is another area where kids could come and get their drops. Sometimes the kids would give little masks, or we'd give them masks to induce them to come. I'm really parched, so I'm walking over here for a drink of water. Should have brought it with me. But these NIDs, that was Penny on the Gate. Yep. Mm-hmm. So these NIDs are happening all over the world, even today. Now, the reason I was pretty despondent about the whole thing, you can't, you've heard me say before, you can't wake up in India and take a good stretch, both arms out without touching two Indians. I mean, it's so crowded. There's so many people. You just cannot imagine. The reason this vaccination program works, though, is not just giving the drops, but it's what happens afterwards. And so the first 2 days, everybody's giving drops. The third day, a team of 3 people, one is from World Health and has the vaccine in an ice chest, because it has to be kept cold. One person is from the area, the local hamlet, wherever it might be, or the downtown, wherever the kids are located from each of their communities. And another is from CDC or the equivalent, who records how many people were seen. So these people go out on day 3 and canvass the area looking for kids to make sure that they all got their drops. How do we know that they had their drops? Well, we don't know their name, we don't know their location or their address, but we do know that when they receive a drop, they get a little indelible ink spot on the pinky. So we can see that they had those drops. And that's what the team is looking for. Here's a team member recording. And on the 4th day, 4th and 5th day, this fellow was from World Health, and he's out in the little town that I mentioned earlier with the kid that had an arm didn't work. I saw him physically chasing kids off a roof to check their finger, see if they had their indelible mark. So there's a process of giving the drops, going back and making sure everybody got the drops, and then checking again. It's quite a process of an NID. Now, this particular drop booth looks like they were up to 236 people that day. So it's just an amazing amount of people in India. And again, why the urgency to succeed? To enable a child to walk a mile, we Rotarians will walk 1,000 miles. Well, the cost of caring for future polio victims far exceeds the cost to eradicate polio, even when we're talking numbers as big as we are in the billions of dollars. And to stop the effort would return the world to the epidemic polio of the 1950s. So if we stop today, it comes right back. Why is that? Well, kids are born, they're not vaccinated. Okay, that's basically it. Simply stated, even today, polio is a single plane ride away. And as Devin will tell you, the final mile in any marathon is the hardest. So it took 3 things: courage, commitment, and cash. In comes Mr. Gates. We all know about his program of 2 for 1, and which is still happening, by the way. Every Polio Plus dollar is matched 2 for 1 by the Gates Foundation. And in the early year, in the 2008, it was 855, almost $1 billion set up for that first challenge grant. Let's see here, what have I done? Okay, so where are we? In 2020, there were 2 endemic nations, 140 total cases of wild polio virus, 56 in Pakistan and 84 in Afghanistan. That is just amazing. In 2021, year to date, as of now, there's still 2 endemic nations, and there's only 1 case in Pakistan and 1 case in Afghanistan. And before Casey asked me, how can that be? Because when I heard those numbers, I said, well, can we really trust that those are true? Well, World Health and CDC have been asking those same questions. And they think that one of the main reasons that the numbers are so low is that people weren't traveling and they weren't going places. They were sequestered just as we were here. So they weren't moving around and passing things around. That's probably the biggest reason. And we also have new drops that we've got. So there's many reasons to continue to get this project done. Here's a few of them, pictures I took while I was over there. Old guys can get it too, Bucky. Anyway, and cute little kitty there. Here's Mustafa again. Dad, real proud of his little child there. This was a youngster 2 doors down from the kid that had the flaccid paralysis. If you look closely, he's got a runny nose, and he's not feeling well, stayed home from school, daycare that day, I suspect. At any rate, does he have polio in this picture? I don't know that, but chances are he could. Here's another picture. So what do you see in the eyes of these youngsters right here? Don't you see a little doubt? Don't you see kind of looking at you saying, oh, are you really So Rotarian, are you here to help me or are you here to just take my picture? So we must, and we can, and we will succeed. And that's my talk. So I want to say thank you. And I have a couple of, before questions,
Anybody got questions?
but I have a moment of silence for everybody to think about. In this process, there's at least 70 vaccinators who have been killed in the process of trying to give out drops, particularly Taliban related and that kind of stuff. So moment of silence in their memories. And 8 were just killed last month, actually. That number 60 is not correct, but trying to get the actual number is difficult. So I'd ask you to join Polio Plus Society, $100. You're pledging $100 a year till it's over. Should be 5 years from now. And one slide didn't come in here. It should be in here, but it's not. And that is, how much money have we spent? That's a really important number. Rotarians in this 35-year quest have collected and donated $2.2 billion. $2.2 billion. The world, the total with that number and the world's total, we're approaching 20 billion with a B dollars in the whole process. And it's thought, and so in the last 10 years, we've been spending $1 billion a year in the process. And it looks like we're looking at 5 more years at $1 billion a year. So about a $5 billion process to get to the end. So don't give up. We're not there yet. It all comes back if we stop. And and another number didn't show up. I'm not sure why. It said it because of our process, of this process. Anyway, I don't know where that slide went, but there was a slide in it that would have some really important things. It's been calculated by the Gates Foundation that 19 million children are not paralyzed because of the efforts of getting rid of polio in the world. 19 million. Okay. And trying to remember some other 20 million. I told about that. Anyway, that's basic. We need give yourselves a round of applause. So let's keep moving down the road. I know. Okay, I'm ready for questions.
Hey, Lee, this is Gene. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gene. I'm sorry to say.
Well, I was going to say you're my Ross Lake fishing buddy, but on a serious note, when you're talking about community response over there, when you go into the communities there, do you get 100% or do you get the naysayers and the voodoo medicine guys that say vaccines don't work, or call it what you want?
Well, not so much with polio. Remember, Gene, when you and I were growing up, polio was absolutely fearsome. People were
Yes.
So the polio vaccine and the polio virus is different than the viruses that we're dealing with now, COVID and coronavirus, which can change quickly. Polio has not changed. There's 3 different varieties of type 1, 2, and 3. We're working now with wild polio virus type 1 is the only one left, and it doesn't change. It's static, and that's why the drops work, and that's why they're accepted around the world. There was a time when the Muslims thought that the Western world was giving their kids drops, and that was going to sterilize the males and all kinds of things. But that's been done away with in the Islamic community, using the Quran and using the ministers and prophets, the people that I can't remember their titles right now, but they've gone door to door and said, look, I know part of it is that every one of the Islamic Muslim people are supposed to go to the Hajj in Mecca as a part of their life goal. And they can't go there without being inoculated. And so when a Haji comes back, he's the most revered person in the community. He knocks on the door and says, I took the drops, your kids will take the drops. And it says so in the Quran and all that stuff. So it is accepted now. And obviously in Afghanistan, there's an issue. The Taliban is okay for at this point has okayed centers for giving out drops, but not door-to-door drops, which is really what saved India and other places. So everybody's working on that issue in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Does that answer your question, Gene?
Yes, thank you, Lee.
You're welcome.
Dr. Harman, I got the mic over here, so I'm going to steal your spot, Stefan. Thank you for your expertise on this. And could you talk about also, because Polio Plus Fund, if you can confirm this, it sounds like for the next couple of days, if Rotarians donate money, then that will be doubled within our club. And then it also sounds like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will also match that money too. So really every dollar is actually $4 that's donated.
Every dollar is $3.
And then this month is $4 because it's matched, right? It's gonna be
Correct.
matched
Yeah,
by the club
yeah.
and then matched
Yeah,
again by them.
Gates is, yes, I confirmed that yesterday. The Bill Gates Foundation is still doing the 2-for-1, $2 for every dollar we raise as Rotarians.
Significant. And then can you talk about, because correct me if I'm wrong, with the Polio Plus, it's not just the polio vaccination, but they're also the Plus is doing future infrastructure programs also to kind of control the other variables of the wild polio. Could you talk about that?
Well, actually, one of the most important things that came out of the 2008 change are the surveillance systems now that are being used. And it is true that in addition to giving oral polio vaccine, we're trying to give other oral drops as well to bring people up to speed, and vitamin A, for instance, and some other things to try to bring everybody from, they're called zero vaccinators, or zero vaccinated, mean the kids that have had nothing. And so now we're actually giving extra things to them in addition to oral polio vaccine along the way.
So John Mino has his hand up.
Hi, John.
Hey, Lee, you just talked about a lot of different numbers, but I noticed one number stood out, and that's the number one of all the people in the club. It is you basically took the time and the cost and the energy to go out there. So I wanted to say thank you, and the least we can do is just give a check or some cash to support you and the others that are going out to do the work. So thank you to you and your peers, and like you had just pointed out, some people that lost their lives just trying to help the world. So thank you.
Well, that's kind of you to say, but it's been a huge group effort. Every Rotarian in the world needs to take an attaboy, because it's really been a big deal, and it is recognized around the world, and we are recognized. And when you leave local Arlington and get to travel outside of the Western world, okay, you're in the status of people that it's hard to explain. You're way up there in people's minds for everything that we have done and are doing. So, we take our presence in a Rotary Club kind of with a grain of salt. Oh yeah, okay, I can go to Rotary today. It's a big deal. And you just need to go to an RI convention or get off on one of these NIDs and see how you're treated and how people feel about you. So you had a question.
Yeah. So my question, you'd mentioned that 5 years, the expectation is to have it fully eradicated in 5 years, which is fantastic. I was wondering though, with the challenges being as unique as they are, how do they get to that reference of 5 years is when they expect to have it eradicated? What could accelerate it? What could set it back?
Well, that's the gist of the story in the Rotary magazine here. And one of the things that's happened is a new vaccine an oral vaccine has been developed, and I'm not avoiding. I had one slide that talked about circulating virus-derived polio vaccine, where the oral drops can actually give polio to people, about 1 in a million. I thought, sure, somebody'd want to know all about that. That's an issue, and there are now more cases of circulating oral virus-derived polio from the drops than there are wild polio cases. So we've just had a brand new oral vaccine developed that's going to be used in areas where polio is still around. And the other idea is that has happened in 2018. We started giving shots for polio. So the point that Mr. O'Leary brings up is that it's not looking at every year for 5 years. It's looking every month. What do we need to do this month, and what area to get to the next month, And if we lose our focus and just say, oh, we're just looking down, we earn this amount of money for next year, we're done. So
Madhu has her hand up, Lee.
well, I don't think I answered your question.
No, I guess I'll phrase my question just a little bit more directly, and I appreciate your answer. But basically, with Taliban taking Afghanistan back over again, how is that going to affect the 5-year plan?
And that's, as I mentioned, the Taliban have said that they will allow NIDs location by location. but they will not allow at this time the going to house to house to house looking for the kids. And that, you know, that's coming from, no, we don't want you in this place at all. So it's a month to month. It's an incremental little change. And you're right, that's a big issue, and Rotary understands it, and the World Health Organization understands it. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. And we need to thank the Canadians and Rotarians outside the United States who have carried the load in Afghanistan and Pakistan for us, since we aren't able to go there or haven't been. What has to do with women, actually. The way we've gotten around that in the past is that women vaccinators, a man vaccinator can't go into a house, a Muslim house, where there's a lady in there. So that was the issue. That is the issue, as I understand it. Anything else? Hi, Madhu.
I just wanted to say thank you, especially after seeing all those pictures and the time you spent in India. And growing up in India, like, you know, all of us were afraid, like, you know, that we might get polio, and we didn't have this much of awareness. And that Rotarians and all of you have taken so much of time to actually eradicate polio in a country which is not, like, I mean, where you're not even related, or you've not even been outside of the country. This shows yet again another reason for me to love being a part of the Rotary. And I actually loved reading the story about the polio story that was in the October Rotarian magazine. And one thing that I'm actually trying to do is, because of the nonprofit that I have with underprivileged children in India, we're actually creating some stories, some success stories, and also why taking polio vaccine is important. And we're going to be doing a YouTube videos, and that way, like, it can actually reach rural India and other places. So I'll actually connect with you later if there is any recording of you know, where you could actually give me like a 1 minute or 2 minute video about the importance of why the polio drops should be taken. We would love to actually add it to that video as well.
Sure,
So
be glad to.
thank you so much for what all of us are doing, and I'll try to do my bit.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I need to say that all the credit goes to the Indian Rotarians. My gosh, what they did and how they did it. They finally set up vaccination booths almost around the clock at train stations, where all the people are coming and going and all that at the transportation hubs. In addition to the NIDs and the publicity from that, they would actually go house to house, and they would also go at transportation hubs. It was an amazing project. Madhu, I came back despondent. I didn't think we'd ever get it done, but we did. And India's been polio free for a lot of years now. Yes.
I just wanted to add one thing on that photo that you showed up there of the open channel of the sanitary sewage. Sanitary sewage is, or sanitation, lack of sanitation, is not only responsible for polio, but for many of the disease that kills most of our world's population: dysentery, cholera, a myriad of diseases. A central wastewater treatment facility or sewage collection and treatment facility is the best way for controlling sanitation. But I wanted to ask you, what is the efficacy of the polio vaccine? If you give it 1 shot, 2 shots, or a 3rd shot, does the efficacy of it keep going up with each additional shot?
Great question. And the answer is yes. And you've all seen Slumdog, the movie Slumdog, whatever. What is it? Yeah, Slumdog Millionaire, and the kid that fell through the privy into the cesspool. Well, those kids typically are, their immune system is just inundated with things they want to, the body wants to have antibodies made from. So we show up with a drop, and that's just one more. It takes many, in third world nations, it takes more exposures to our drops to get the same level of immunity. Except now we have a different drop that has an adjuvant that says to the body, hey, take care of me first, forget about these. And that's happened 3 times. So, and the most current one is even one drop will probably do it, but I know they're going to get 2. So anyway, great questions.
Thank you, Dr. Harman.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you
So,
very much.
Give it up.